Information workshop. I would like to introduce Dr. Lee Beach. He's Deputy Director of the NASA Research Langley Center. He's served in this position since January of '92. He's the General Manager of the Center and responsible for directing research and technology programs and for institutional management of all facilities and equipment. Dr. Beach began his NASA career here at Langley in October of 1970 as a research engineer. Okay, done.
On behalf of NASA's Aeronautics and Space Transportation Technology Enterprise, and certainly on behalf of the Langley Research Center, I'd like to welcome all of you to what I think is going to be a very important workshop. As I'm sure all of you are aware, over the last year, the NASA Aeronautics and Space Transportation Technology Enterprise put a lot of effort, along with people from organizations that you represent, in producing this document, 3 Pillars for Success, which includes 10 goals for aeronautics and space transportation technology. I've been in this agency almost 30 years now, and as far as I'm concerned, this document is one of the very best that has been produced over that time period in focusing efforts in this arena in areas that the general public can really relate to. And I am really feeling good about what has happened over the last year in trying to focus us in NASA and our partner agencies and organizations in industry toward achieving some very ambitious goals. These goals are extremely ambitious. They're stretch goals, they're very challenging. But in my view, they are very, very important. They're important in establishing a framework such that the aviation industry can continue to grow the way we are all projecting that it will grow. But in order for that to happen, in my view, we have to produce an environment for safety, for the environment, and for capacity that removes those as constraints for growth. And so one of the things that this document does is challenge us to essentially eliminate barriers to growth for the aviation industry. I think we can do that, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of teamwork, and a lot of commitment by lots of people, including you here in this Aviation Weather Information workshop. So we have a tough job to do, and I'm glad that you are all here. I'm really gratified with the turnout. We hopefully aren't going to run out of seats here, Mike, and we'll have plenty of information, plenty of dialogue, and plenty of exchange that will set the stage for actually accomplishing goal number 1 in this, which is the safety goal, to dramatically reduce the accident rate for the aviation industry. So let me say welcome to Langley. Welcome to a workshop that I think will be an important one for getting us on the road to where we need to be. I trust that you're going to have a productive workshop here. I know that you will. And please let me know if there's anything that we can do to make the workshop more productive and to make your stay here more enjoyable. With that, I'll turn the meeting over, I guess, to Mike. And let me just end by saying really important work we have to do. Those of us who travel are very concerned about weather information today and for the future. So we're counting on you. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Lee. Good morning, folks. I'm Mike Lewis, and I'm the director for the NASA's Aviation Safety Program. And this is going to be good. Lots of folks here, and this is the kind of the kickoff workshop, basically, for the whole strategy and approach that we have for planning out the program and making sure that we keep kind of government and industry working together here to make it all work. So let me, kind of advantage of being the director of the program, I got to yak a little bit at the beginning here. So I want to kind of just give a quick overview of how we got here. Won't take but 3 minutes. And then talk a little bit about the aviation weather information from my perspective anyway. Lee talked about the 3 pillars document and the national goals, of which the aviation safety goal, cut the accident rate by 80% over the next 10 years, is not only the first goal, but I think it is, and or if not, it will become the most visible goal that NASA has for a whole bunch of reasons. However, that's the NASA goal is not to, we can't do it by ourselves to achieve that reduction in the accident rate. We are responsible for, as are other folks, but not solely responsible for the enabling technology and doing some of that fundamental R&D and get the ball rolling on the R&D side. To provide that information and that technology to achieve the goal. There's kind of 3 steps in the process. There's the R&D step, there's the certification step, which clearly is the FAA major role, and there's the last step, which is development and production and implementation, which is the industry, the airframers, the avionics manufacturers, and the airlines and operators. All 3 of those need to work together. All 3 of them cross over into each other's territory to make the whole thing work. And we can't do it without all 3. So that's why we're trying to get large groups like this together to help guide the program and put it together. So NASA's got one piece of making this goal happen. FAA has a very large piece throughout. Industry has a very large piece. Other government agencies have their pieces, and hopefully we'll make it work. ASSIST. Many of you are ASSIST veterans. Aviation Safety Investment Strategy Team process, which really, for NASA anyway, kicked this whole activity off. White House Commission on Aviation Safety and Security met through February or so of this year, over a few-month period. And their report out in February coincided with the kickoff of NASA's adoption of the White House Commission goal of let's cut the accident rates, and NASA adopted it into our 3-pillar strategy and kicked off the beginning of what has become the aviation safety program. And we went through this workshop process where we invited pretty large groups again, both government and industry and operators and universities and so on, to come together for workshops to try and identify the investment strategy. We were given a nice aggressive goal, given a fairly sizable intended budget. And it was a clean sheet of paper, basically, as to what we do as a government and as a nation as to how to go about doing that. And so we started this ASSIST workshop process, broke down into 5 teams. Most of you are aware of that, or all, I guess, are, of which clearly one was the weather team. And that brings us, that weather team and then kind of the key goal of that weather group is what brings us here today. Back in August, I presented a kind of feedback. We went through the ASSIST workshop process through about April or so of this year, and we came back internal to NASA after all of that recommendation and planning and results of the workshop to get our own act together a little bit and figure out where this money's coming from and organize the program and so on, and then plan it a little bit further, and at least the process and approach. And then came back in August, back up at NASA headquarters in Washington to give a report back to the industry and kind of where things stood. And we kind of talked about 4 things. The first was the outcome of that investment strategy process. Second was our program organization, how we're kind of pulling people and work breakdown structure and so forth together to set this thing up. Third was to announce a series of workshops, of which this is workshop number 1 for the program, where we would try to move from investment strategy, general ideas, notional projects that could happen within those key areas. A fair amount of thought there, but investment strategy level. Now we had to move from, okay, let's take these particular program areas or proposed program areas and projects and move to what are we really going to do with a realistic budget, with a realistic time frame, who's going to do what's the right role for the government, et cetera, what's the right role for industry. And we laid out, the parts of the program that we're going to have these initial workshops. And we tried to lay out, or I tried to lay out a bit of kind of a philosophical or a strategic approach for the program and how we're going to try and work it. NASA's not going to pay for all of anything. We want to kind of partner with groups that are interested in putting up their resources as well as combining them with the government's to kind of pull stuff through the system as opposed to NASA trying to pay for some R&D and point to it and hope people come use it. We encourage folks to come to prepare for this workshop by teaming up with like-minded people with similar ideas and notions about how to go about things like aviation weather information, and try and come together prepared to this workshop with those groups on the way to getting ready. We encourage you folks to do your homework on the program and the background to the program, and come to these workshops again, not to have a kind of a fun and interesting discussion about aviation weather information, but to try and make it targeted to where we really have to get from here. And some of the, what we want to discuss and make sure we cover in this workshop is for aviation weather information in particular, identify the key issues, figure out as a group here the main thrust of what's required and what's needed, and then get to what's, we NASA want to learn from this, what's the right role for us, NASA, and the government basically in this endeavor, and what's the kind of proper role for industry, so we can get that straight. We also want to be able to intelligently plan the program now in detail, this particular activity within the aviation safety program. And thirdly, we want to intelligently prepare whatever solicitation to contracted support that we want to get for the program to try and pull things together. We didn't want to just go out with some statement of work that we thought was kind of neat and so forth and get some responses. We want to make sure that we did that intelligently as a result of a teamed activity. A little bit about the organization, if you haven't seen or don't know this. Program Office Lead Center is here at Langley. I'm the program manager. We have deputy program managers at each of the other three NASA Aeronautics Center, Ames, Lewis, and Dryden. And in fact, notably, Cynthia Null here is here from Ames, who in our somewhat convoluted structure here for the kickoff of this activity for the next year and a half, more complex than you'll ever want to know of it. She's the sponsor in the R&T-based technology activity for the funds, actually, for the initial phase of this program. So she has a dual hat here, and so is interested from two angles. But anyway, in our structure, we have 5 level 2 areas outside of the program office at Langley, with system-wide monitoring and modeling is one. System-wide accident prevention, single aircraft accident prevention, weather accident prevention brings us here, and accident mitigation as the 5 sub-teams where the output of the assist process was organized. Jay Shin from NASA Lewis Research Center is the program manager for the weather accident prevention piece, and Jay will kind of give a quick rundown of that when I get through. Okay, let me talk a little bit about, that's the general stuff. Let me talk a little bit about aviation weather information and why I think it's at least kind of neat. 3 pieces, seems to me. And this is maybe old hat to folks, but weather product generation, the data link, monitoring and display. So kind of 3 main pieces of what we're all talking about. Trying to do a better job, and this is kind of the theme from ASSIST as we went through all this thing, and clearly the community was well organized to do this, and this community that was represented here. Getting available ground-based information transferred and displayed and uplinked digitally and graphically displayed in the cockpit was kind of a #1 good thing, right thing to do on the weather side of things. And it's kind of an ideal, well, it's kind of an interesting setup from my perspective, because there's so much that you can do. It's from the early get-go to future R&D and future expansion of these kinds of activities. Let me just go, national radar summary is a no-brainer. To get that information up into the cockpit is just healthy for all concerned. Turbulence maps, icing maps, going from real-time information to nowcast to forecast information. Lightning summaries. In fact, here's a NASA Marshall Research Center. It's got a research satellite in orbit. And here's the month of January. Basically, all lightning strikes worldwide from this satellite orbit summarized for the month of January. Well, 4 of these satellites in geostationary orbit would give you lightning data worldwide, real time, know where every convective thunderstorm is happening, basically instantaneously worldwide. We do a pretty good job. If we get our national radar summary up from the using all of our ground-based radars and so forth in this country, we can do a pretty good job right now of knowing where all of this activity is. Fly to South America, fly to Central America, fly to Africa, fly transoceanic, there's nothing there. Well, you can get it there, and via the kind of methodology and structure that we're talking about here, and that's just a quantum leap in the kind of valuable information that would potentially be available in the cockpit. Let me go back to this kind of series. I talk, lightning information, okay, worldwide national information, and go to worldwide information. Time history loops, kind of get a trend information already proving valuable, and some of the anecdotal information coming from test and service right now. Wind information, hey, this isn't just safety potential. Clearly this is an application that's not just safety, it's an economic potential benefit. You can pick a better wind profile for your transoceanic or transcontinental route, you save money. IMC maps, especially for the GA folks, knowing where the airports are that they can fly into so they don't get themselves into trouble. Get into the terminal conditions for the airport. Aircraft type-specific applications. Helicopters flying at a very low level might use different products than the GA world or the transport world. Sulfur dioxide, volcanic ash information from orbiting satellites. Try and get volcanic ash plume information real time would be a quantum leap over what we have today. Getting into, say, TDWR information coming into the cockpit potentially. Runway conditions, airport info. Well, if you got airport information, why not company information coming up via the data link? If you got company information, why not passenger and commercial entertainment sort of information? Traffic information displayed in the cockpit. Ultimately, terrain and obstacle information in the airport. Getting kind of away from weather products here, and that's kind of the point. Over time, we get this type of infrastructure in place, the world is wide open as to the types of things that you can do for safety, for economic reasons, and for value-added reasons for passengers or for the operators or and so on. So it's kind of a fun area to be in, basically, from my perspective, because there's things you can do right away, and it's got growth and R&D written all over it, just here on the weather product side. Or the product side, you're getting out of the weather products. Data link, go through the list again. Low cost applications for the GA user. High bandwidth applications for the commercial user. Ultra high bandwidth, we start getting into the passenger communications or even passenger entertainment. Let this thing buy its way into commercial transport for other reasons. Low altitude coverage, big deal maybe for GA or rotorcraft applications. Worldwide coverage for economic payoffs and safety payoffs for transport operators. Maybe this isn't just one-way information of broadcast, although it could start out that way or could be that way. Ultimately get into two-way communications, so every aircraft's a sensor, basically, and providing its own weather information or communications back down to the ground. 10 to the minus 3, 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 9. There's some stuff here that's low criticality information that can be considered to be passed along. There's some, if we start getting into traffic information or maybe critical weather information or ultimately, say, obstacle terrain database information broadcast from the local airport for future runway applications and landing and synthetic vision, another part of our program that we're proposing to talk about, another workshop. There's all these issues wrapped up into how do you do that and how do you make it work and how do you make it cost effective. So, kind of food for thought here maybe. Monitoring and display side. Well, you can display just what's piped into you from the ground weather product provider and display it straight out. You can start using your own ownership information to enhance the capability of that display. Only display the information that's important to you, for instance. Start getting into automated advisories. Say, if your system knows this information is coming in and kind of knows where you want to go, it can tell you of interesting information, hazards, cautions, warnings along your route. Next step up, decision aids. Well, if you kind of know something's in front of you, hazards, automated warnings, and cautions along your route, how about a little advice about what to do about it from an economic or from a safety perspective or other perspective? Integrated strategic and tactical weather information display. Maybe not just the piped information from the ground on a display, but why don't we combine, ultimately, radar information, other information on the same deal? Well, if you're going to do that, why not integrated traffic weather? Integrated weather and traffic, same display. Why not integrated traffic, weather, and terrain information, potentially same display? Lots of R&D issues there. Can you cram all this thing onto one display, et cetera, et cetera? But the point is the possibilities start to grow. When you have a ground infrastructure potentially in place to kind of bring this information together, a data link infrastructure potentially in place, glass in the cockpit, that's the infrastructure that you can use, and then that you need to grow all sorts of other, forget the weather even, value-added type of enhancements, safety value-added and economic value-added. Add GPS into that mixture, add high-end data processing into the picture as it's coming along. There's just a world of opportunity. So that, to me, anyway, is kind of why I'm intrigued with this whole area, because I see it as a way for this type of infrastructure, as well as the safety benefit, but this type of infrastructure to start getting its way and buy its way into the system in a very near-term time frame. So, summary, for lots of reasons, technically, safety-wise, programmatically, it's kind of an ideal opportunity. Safety benefits, yes, certainly, number one kind of issue coming out, or proposal coming out of ASSIST. Also economic payoffs. If you got your wins, you know where the weather is, you start saving money en route for the commercial transport operators. Clear requirements from a very mature community. That was evident in ASSIST. I mean, the weather part of ASSIST was sort of leading the pack because the community knew what they wanted to do and basically knew how they wanted to do it. It was just, it seemed to me anyway, a matter of bringing it all together. Payoffs across the board to the GA, transport world, and ultimately internationally. As I was saying, we can do some of this real soon, I think, and then we can also grow it over the very long term as this type of infrastructure gets put into place. I think it's a commercial business opportunity. This information is sellable for distributors on the ground, data link providers, value-added enhancement product providers, and so on. That makes it a win-win. I mean, I think there's a profit out there for folks to be providing this information, building the equipment to provide this information, and hopefully that's the kind of thing that's going to pull it through the system, folks that want to make that profit first and best. I talked about it fosters the core data link infrastructure, and from my perspective on the government side, it's kind of been a program model effort for how we're hoping to work with the FAA, National Weather Service, and NASA, and other government agencies all together. Ken Leonard and folks from the FAA and other support that we're getting has kind of been top-notch, and I think it should be the model for the program. So for all of that, this AWIN, Strategic Weather Information, Aviation Weather Information activity, is going to be the program leader. It's going to be a high visibility activity. I foresee kind of high visibility, like it or not, outcomes and results of this activity being reported at level 1 and higher for the program as key, interesting, and technically valuable and publicly good information coming out of the program. I think it's going to be our leader in how we're going to work the program in fostering business partnerships and teaming between the government and industry and multiple industry teams. Talked about our intergovernment communication or coordination. It's also kind of an ideal leader for the program as we start to figure how to expand out for international coverage. I mean, this program, in order to satisfy its goals, let the aviation market grow to its full potential, we've got to have a world view in what we're doing. It's not just a cut the action rate in the United States issue to let that market grow. It's cut the action rate worldwide. And this is clearly an has international applicability. And in fact, that's almost at least for the transport world, that's where the weather information is weakest. And that's where it's going to be a first opportunity as we start talking with other nations, as we are starting to do, in trying to hook together and make this program work worldwide and have other nations, as they are interested in doing, adopt this the goal. This is going to be an opportunity from an R&D perspective and actually from a business perspective to get this type of system implemented worldwide. So lastly, because of all those reasons, we want to make it work. As much as I can do, we will make it work. Don't know how to do it completely yet. This is kind of our kickoff. We're learning as we go here a little bit on anywhere from logistics to business partnership arrangements to how do we structure this NRA, NASA Research Announcement that we'll talk about. How do we just run a program and much, not to speak of the technology activity, but for all of what I just went through, it's an exciting activity. Personal interest. There's broad interest across the community, I believe. It's the right kind of thing to do, and so we got to do it right, and we got to make it work. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next we would like to hear from Dr. Jaewon Shin from the NASA Lewis Research Center. He is currently the Level 2 lead for the aviation safety program for aviation weather in general. So, Dr. Shin, there you go.
Thanks, Charlie. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good morning. As Charlie introduced me to you, I am the manager for weather accident prevention, and Mike talked about a general safety program, sort of an overview of the program, and I would like to bring it down one layer lower than the overall program and talk to you about very briefly what the weather accident prevention element is all about. As Mike said, we're starting, and there's some confusion and some coordination, lack of coordination, and things of that nature have happened and are happening also. And so I think some of you who are coming to this workshop probably had might have some different ideas of what this workshop will be all about. So hopefully the few charts that I prepared can help you kind of go through what we are trying to do here. And actually, Dr. Beach talked about the challenge and tough job that you all have for the next 2 days. But I think another challenge that I see is keeping on schedule. So I try not to go overboard here. Okay, let me start with this chart. As Mike talked about the assist activity, and I trust most of you either have directly involved in that activity or had a fairly good understanding of what happened for about 4 months of very intense activity, I would call. In the left column, the table shows the priority of list of investment areas that were recommended at the end of the assist activity from the weather team. And you can see several areas that you might be familiar, and you've probably seen this list somewhere along the line. But the right-hand column shows what we are currently having as safety program weather accident prevention elements. And we have 4 elements. And I think Charlie will have all these presentation materials bound in proceeding. So we will have that available for you probably sometime tomorrow, I think. But if you look at that chart, the right-hand side shows only 4 elements, whereas we have on the left-hand column about 12 priority items that were identified by the assist activity. And we try to regroup or rearrange where they make sense and get down to manageable size of the sub-elements that we can manage, and also we can embark the activities. So that's the aviation weather information. That's the focus of this workshop and the reason why you're here for the next 2 days. And that includes data dissemination, which is the top priority coming out of the assist activity, and also crew dispatch, air traffic control monitoring presentation, and decision aids that Mike also talked about. And also down to number 5, weather product generation, and also advanced aviation meteorology. And those are the ones that we currently regrouped under aviation weather information. And if you see icing hazard solutions, we have another element in icing, and that will be addressed in that element. And also we had a training that was identified fairly high from assist activity, and I think everybody appreciate how important the training could be in terms of reducing fatal accidents. So I think that's kind of no-brainer. That is very important activity, and we are currently consolidating these training activities and items under that training element in different level 2, if you kind of jog back to what Mike showed, that we had 5 level 2 elements, and system-wide accident prevention is one of them, and training will be hosted there. And then we have turbulence as another major sub-element. And then we have those vision technology and tactical sensors. And I list that as a synthetic vision, and I think some of those activities can be spread out, again, where it makes sense among the different elements in the weather. So that's, I struggle to come up with a chart that can show some relationship between the assist recommendations and the current structure that we have in a clear way. And I'm sure with your input, and I cannot improve this kind of chart, but that's right now, as of today, how it stands. And that doesn't mean that the right-hand column will remain as it is and set in concrete. If it makes sense to rearrange and repackage, we'll do that. And again, I'd like to emphasize what Mike mentioned in his talk. We are not coming as the NASA knows all the answers and we'll straighten out this world. That's not our attitude at all. And I think it's particularly true in weather area that we would like to work with all of you and try to find the solutions together. And where NASA can play and contribute, that's what we are seeking for. We are not trying to say we know the answer, so come and work with us. Okay, we already talked about the goal of the overall safety program and what is the goal of the weather element. I think it's simply put, as I put in the chart there, it might be overly simplified goal, but I think we have to have some very clear goal that will link up to the overall program goal. So that's why it looks very simple. And I think the goal has to be very simple and clear. And underneath that, we will develop a lot of detailed objectives and approaches and all that, and we are in the process of doing that. But that's basically reducing the fatal accident rate or accidents relating or resulted from aviation weather by 5-fold over 10 years and 10 over 20 years. I included the guideline estimates there, and I want to emphasize the estimate, the word estimate there, and that is to give you some idea of what kind of funding profile that we have as we are talking today. And again, I broke into 4 elements, and please note that that is gross in millions, not net. And some of you probably have a very good understanding of how NASA differentiates between gross and net. I'm sure in your own organization also has that kind of differentiation. But I didn't really have really good database to show all 4 elements in net, and the net dollars are still fluctuating. So rather than giving you that, I thought maybe just give you gross dollars. And that's why I emphasize this estimate, just to give you some ballpark information of what we are talking about here. Let me just end my talk by showing this point of contact chart. And the box that is highlighted in blue, that is why you're here. And Frank Jones, if I, at some point, I'm sorry, what happened here? Okay, I think that wake you all up. At some point, I think either Charlie or someone was going to introduce Frank Jones, but maybe it's as good time as any. Okay, Frank Jones is up here at the Langley, And he is the program manager for Aviation Weather Information. Maybe I lost it. Okay. And as I mentioned, there are 4 other elements in aviation, the weather accident prevention. And I listed names and phone numbers and email address. And there is also a lot more comprehensive information on the web. And any one of us sitting in this front row here can give you the website address. It's actually in the NASA homepage, agency homepage. But I would encourage you to visit that website, and there is a lot of good information, and I'm just talking very small portion of that. And I would encourage you to go into that website and go through some of the material there. So any one of these people can help you in the areas that you like to get more information about the weather accident prevention. And this, again, as Mike mentioned, this is the first workshop. So you should have some proud that you are really trailblazing some of the activities that our safety program is taking place here. And so we have another several workshops planned and scheduled, and those are the ones that will be associated with the weather accident prevention. And I think the firm date right now is the synthetic vision. I don't know whether Carrie Walker is in the room here, but Carrie is also working at Langley, and she will be hosting that synthetic vision workshop, and I'm sure some of you are interested in attending that too. And icing systems, currently I'm wearing 2 hats, as many other people do. And I am also the manager for icing systems. And we are thinking of holding a workshop sometime in February. And we don't have the date yet. And on that website that I mentioned, there is a section that you could go into, and then there is a whole list of workshops that are being either scheduled or have been scheduled. So we'll post the date, exact date on that website. And turbulence, I should make some note on that. I think earlier, some of you might have gotten information about this workshop, and that information might have included that turbulence would be also included in this workshop. After some discussion, the turbulence is, since it's another element, as you see on the chart, we wanted to have the separate workshop for the turbulence, and we will talk about weather information related topics in turbulence. And I think Charlie will go through that in some more detail. So we will talk about some weather information related turbulence topics at this workshop, but there will be another separate workshop for turbulence. So that's what I prepared, and I hope that at least gave you some idea of how this AWIN workshop fits in the weather accident prevention and how that element fits in overall aviation safety program from Mike's talk and my talk. And again, I'd like to also extend my welcome to all of you, and I think I can even count the empty seats here, so that's very I think encouraging. And again, we set out the 2 major objectives for this workshop, and I don't want to steal thunder from Charlie, so I don't want to talk about those objectives. But the second one is very important, that we like to get to know the most of you who are coming here. And I think some of us have been working in weather area for many number of years, and some of us have not. And so we would like to work with you and get to know each other. And I think that's also encouraged among yourselves, that you probably know a lot of people who are attending here, but it's a good forum to make a network and learn each other who's doing what and what areas can be worked together. So please come and talk to us, any one of us sitting up front here, and talk among yourselves. And for next 2 days, I hope we learn some more about each other. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm Charlie Scanlon. I'm a researcher and working in the Aviation Weather Information program, safety program. So I would like to go through some of the mechanics of the conference. I suppose everybody already knows you're in the Pearl Young Theater here. However, the restrooms, the ladies and men's are just take out the door and hang to the right, and they'll be right over in that area. Hope everybody's found the coffee and donut area. That's in the lobby. Again, it's just sort of straight out and to the right. There is a small cafeteria. However, I think if you had 20 people show up there, it'd be an overflow crowd. So what we'll do for lunch is we'll try to go to the main cafeteria. So to get to the main cafeteria, we do have our buses that will be running from here to the main cafeteria. If you drove, all you have to do is go out the front door and hang to the right. Go to a complete dead end and hang to the left, and a dead end, and there's the cafeteria. There's parking on both sides of the street here. So for our quick lunch, the cafeteria is real easy to find. Just go to 2 dead ends and you're there. Yeah, this takes you around the detour. Yeah, right. Okay. It's also the best way to go anyway. Okay. Frank Jones, of course, he's the manager of the Langley Airspace Operations Center, and he's going to be the timekeeper and make sure that I don't go over time here, and everyone else. So for those speakers, remember that Frank's going to try to keep us honest on our time. Why are we holding this workshop? Well, some of the primary objectives are listed here. First of all, we want to try to get interested parties together, and we've been fairly successful, it looks like, from the size of the crowd here. At least we have half of that done. And, of course, we want to discuss the topics in the aviation weather information element of the safety program. We are going to have a NASA research announcement coming out, and in that, what we want to do is to encourage interested parties to form partnerships or coalitions to come to NASA for partial funding. And so the description of that is in the form of a statement of work that's publicly out on the web today and has been for a few days. There's hard copies of it out on the table out in the hall. So that's a statement of work. What is it we're looking for in the NASA research announcement and how we will expect to fund those proposals. It's the partial funding. We're hoping that that people who do put forward their proposals are really have a conviction in their proposal and will be donating resources towards that proposal it will be a sign of how much they're committed towards the proposal. And of course, we're also interested in identifying the government's role in advancing aviation weather information systems. What is NASA's role? The FAA, National Weather Service. So we were trying to put this together as a workshop environment. We had a hard time finding a table to sit 200 people around, however. So the first day is it's going to be more of the description, program description, the goals, what are the objectives of the workshop. The FAA is really bending over backwards. Ken Leonard, Rick Hewinkel, and others. Ken especially helped. He's helped invite approximately half the speakers here. So we've been trying to coordinate with the FAA, and we want to keep that up, and especially even in the NRAs. We want to make sure that if you take the amount of money that NASA's putting in and compare it to the $4 billion that the National Weather Service and the FAA are spending this decade, our amount is really a drop in the bucket. So what we need to do is to try to complement work that they're doing and not duplicate it. So we're trying to make sure that in our emphasis it's going to be more on the airborne system and how this can utilize the other information, how it all fits together, and is not a duplication of effort. So we've also tried to schedule some nice breaks here, 30-minute breaks. So if we stay on schedule, that'll give you time to get out and talk to other people, talk to us, and hopefully we can get you, if you are interested in partnering with other people, we encourage you to do so. So all ideas, we will, especially during the second day, we have these topical discussion areas. With the exception of the last one there, what these are places where we would kind of really like to have a workshop environment where you have an opportunity to participate. So what we've asked is that the implementers of these workshops spend approximately 10 to 15 minutes of the 45-minute time period and then open it up to the floor for discussions. So we'll have 2 microphones that will be going up and down the aisle. We are recording all comments, so we would especially like you to speak using the microphone, stating your name and affiliation. We will try to transcribe as much as we can, as accurately as we can, and put that in the proceedings so that you can go back and say if you see Maria Perón's WSI's name and want to contact her, you can see she spoke and what she said, etc. So in other words, identifying yourself and your position will help in the networking and the partnership arrangements, hopefully. So the second day is the topical discussion areas where we will have lots of opportunity and encourage you to participate, help keep us straight. In the wrap-up session especially, we will be soliciting input on this NASA research announcement. So we have it publicly available. We hope that many of you have already read it, the statement of work for that, and so that you can come and give us input on that. Are we right? How should we change it? You know, how can we make it more appropriate to NASA's role in helping in the aviation weather program? In that research announcement, we expect to have approximately $2.5 million for FY98 that we would like to use in helping get over the hurdles of implementation of some aviation weather systems. So that if you have a system, if a collection of companies has a system that they want to develop, make commercially available, and it'll help aviation safety, and they need some help from NASA, that's what we're here for. Write us a proposal. We'd love to read it and see if we can fund it. That's for FY98. We expect to have approximately double that for every year from 99 to 2000. So so the amount of that's approximately the amount of money. Of course, it depends upon the legislature and our appropriations. So the proposals, we're encouraging that have the proposals cover however much time it takes to have an actual implementation or initial implementation with a second phase follow-on. So that the earlier implementation ones, of course, will certainly get a star as far as evaluating them, but I assume that there will be more phases to it because of the growth. The draft statement, of course, is posted at this address and is on the table. The actual NRA, what we want to do is to get your input. How should we change it? Is there anything we should change? And then we want to make it public. So instead of making a public NRA, we're waiting for a week or 2 weeks after this workshop to rewrite it with your input. So please be sure and give that, especially on using the microphone, so we'll have a record of it. So the way we have the NRA structured right now, we've sort of subdivided it into complete systems and into some topical areas. So in the complete systems, we're looking for, we've subdivided that into 3 different types. What is a complete system? Well, we're thinking in terms of proposals that address all four of those elements that Jay Shin put up. That is the data dissemination. That's more than data link, however. That's also, how do you, the network on the ground, what sort of pre-existing network? Do you need to add new pieces to it to get something going? That includes the data link itself, multiple data links, in fact. We all know that aircraft flying out there today have multiple data links even. So it could include broadcast satellites, two-way, terrestrial, whatever. So at any rate, it would include some sort of weather source information, which could be enhanced weather products from commercial weather providers. The proposal could include a new aviation weather information map, for example, in turbulence. One of the problems, as I'm sure our good friends from the airlines will mention, is that they really would like to have turbulence information. So development of a turbulence map in maybe using the MCARS information to enhance what's already there to make a better product and then distribute it to aircraft. That would certainly be something. Icing the same way. So this workshop doesn't cover a turbulence sensor as far as how is it utilized in the airplane. But if it's a piece of a big system proposal where that information is data linked to the ground, a weather product is built and then sent to other airplanes, then yes, certainly it would be covered. So a system would include the weather, the network, the airplane. How is it used in the airplane? So what we've done is we've divided it up into 3 systems, realizing that there is an appreciable difference between these systems. If you come up and says, hey, I've got this data link that'll do everything, well, I think a bunch of us have fallen into that trap. No, I don't think so. There's going to be multiple data links out there in the future. And if you take a look at just the National Airline Air Transport and National GA, hey, if you're Delta Airlines, it costs $50,000 to put this AWIN system in your airplane. Hey, if you can prove to the Vice President of Finance that it'll pay for itself in 1 year, plus it'll enhance safety, hey, that's a bargain for them. They'll buy it. But you talk to a guy in a 172, would he put this $50,000 system in his plane? I doubt it. Most of them would. So there are differences in those markets. So we have divided it up and solicited proposals for each one of these systems, but we've also allowed the possibility of proposals incorporating more than one. So if you have a particular system you're working on that would include 2 or more of those, certainly we would love to have those proposals even. So, and they would be funded at approximately twice the level of one that just covered one of these elements. Realizing also there are just the topical areas. For example, Ralph Markson of ARA might want to get together with his lightning data with Tenny Lindholm and NCAR and put together a nice lightning map of some kind or another that's distributed by any of these systems. That would be a topical area that we would like to have a proposal on, for example, or any piece of it, a data link or enhanced weather product. Those would be, if you don't want to build a complete system and want to put in a proposal for pieces of it, that's covered in the very bottom of them, the topical areas. The funding guidelines, due to our limited resources, are outlined as a proposed funding at this level. So that if you have a proposal for a national GA system, then we feel like that $400,000 for the first year and double that approximately for each year thereafter would be a way that we could help. So we are soliciting proposals under the National GA, National Airline Air Transport, worldwide system. Again, if you're flying an American Airlines airplane down in South America, they'd love to have this lightning data that Mike put up and know where all the thunderstorms are, convective activity in real time. That would be great. So right now you ask them what they have, well, they're lucky if they can talk to fixed base operators, stick their head out the door sometimes and say what it looks like. So the worldwide is very definitely a place where we would love to have some good proposals on worldwide weather information. How will we get these proposals in? How will we select them? Well, that's TBD at this point. But here are a few of the attributes that we would be looking at for our selection criteria. First of all, does it have an effect on the accident rate? Yes or no? Of course, you have some boilerplate statements in here like the technical, scientific merit, feasibility. The earliest and widest implementation. So if we get two proposals where someone can actually implement an idea in 1 year and somebody else the same idea in 5, obviously which one we would rank higher in our rankings. So the innovativeness and originality, soundness of the proposed work plan, participant resource contributions is very important. So we believe that when you list what resources you're putting up for the project, that gives us a certain commitment that will help us in evaluating it. So as Mike said earlier, we're not looking to finance all of anything. We're looking to help you get over hurdles, however that may be. And of course the commercial potential. So when this program dies out in 5 years, will this proposal result in something that'll keep going? Yes or no? Does it have commercial viability? Will it pay for itself? Yes or no? People are willing to pay for weather information if you show them how it can pay itself off, especially in a year's time if you're talking to an airline. Partnership arrangements, open system architecture. If you come in with a proprietary data link that you and only you can use, that's going to be graded pretty low. So the more open system it is. You have these major airlines out there that Warren Qualley from American Airlines, Carl Naval United, etc., who have very excellent meteorological departments. They've proven that they pay for themselves. So you need a system that will allow them to send their proprietary information to their aircraft and whoever else they so choose. So your system should be open enough to be able to include as much as possible growth, different weather sources serving different end users. So the growth potential is very important in evaluating these proposals. How will we weight those? I don't know. We're hoping we can, the evaluations will hopefully be going through the FAA and NASA to make sure that we do supplement what's going on, that it is relevant. So we're hoping to get good evaluations. How those will be done is TBD at this point. Your input will certainly be appreciated on those. The timeline for the NRA is that we have now public with at least a statement of work. After this workshop is over with, we want to alter that, put in the contractual arrangements that Mike Durham's going to be talking about, and make a public proposed NRA, hopefully the mid part of November of this year. We're proposing that the deadline for the proposals be January the 15th. That's a short time period, but I know of lots of groups who are already working on proposals. So hopefully there are a lot of people in this room who have ideas already in their mind, and the question is that enough time, yes or no, for you to get your proposal in or not? The reason we feel compelled is because of the rather slowness of the bureaucracy sometimes. So by the time we make our selections, that takes time. By the time we award a contract, if it's awarded April the 1st, of course, that only gives you 6 months in FY98. So that's the reason we feel compelled to speed up the process. But so then your input, if we want to delay proposed deadline a month, all of a sudden you only have 5 months in FY98 to do your work. So it really mushrooms on back. Okay, Frank, how are we on time here? About 5 minutes. How about questions? Does anybody like to ask any questions at this point? No questions. Okay. Was there one? No? Okay. Okay. Well, in that case, we'll move right along with the schedule then. And Mike Durham is going to talk next. He, of course, is responsible for business development for the aviation safety program. So, Mike, we'll turn it over to you.
I want to talk to you about the partnering philosophy for this program. You are on the point of the spear. This is the first workshop, so we're going to be looking for feedback, but I want to convey to you what the motivation of this program is in terms of developing competing teams to go out and work on these research programs. I want to give you very briefly what an NRA is and why we've chosen this mechanism, or why we're going down this path. I'm going to give you a layman's description of what the numerous contract vehicles are available for us to use as a result of this NRA, and then I'm going to summarize with what our desired proposal attributes are, what we're really looking for in your proposal from the business side. The philosophy of this program from a business viewpoint is for the NASA funding to be a catalyst. We don't expect to take $400,000 in FY98 and buy a reduction in the fatal accident rate. We do hope that by taking this money, encouraging the right participants to pool their resources to work together, we can remove a hurdle, a technology hurdle, and make something that's actually already in development, has a certification problem, or is already certified but has an implementation problem, something that we can push something across the goal line, and that can have a near term, being 5 to 10-year reduction in the fatal accident rate. As we've said a number of times, NASA's not planning on paying for all of anything. The philosophy is we want to leverage resources. We're looking for cost sharing. One of the intentions of the partnering in this program is to stretch the investment timescales. Typically, you as an individual company cannot invest in something that you don't see a return on that investment within 3 years. Sometimes it's 1 to 2 years. NASA usually works on the far end. We think we can build some alliances here, do some partnership where we can pull the industry timescales out a little bit and bring NASA's down considerably. And I'll talk to you a little more about that notionally. But the point here is we want to get away from the very near-term focused investments and look for something a little on the longer range. We want to avoid the Band-Aids, and we're really searching for cures here. And by dealing with one company who is only looking for a return on investment in 1 to 2 years, we think we can do that. We also want to increase risk tolerance by having partners who are willing to share risk and implement systems, not components. We think we'll have a much more successful attempt at meeting these bold metrics, these bold goals. I've got a notional chart here that describes that stretching of risk and timescales. And this is a Bruce Holmes chart. I'll give him the credit, but it helps me a lot in understanding what the purpose here of partnering. Why are we doing this partnering? And it's from two perspectives. Within the industry, why do you need to partner with some of the people you normally compete with, or on a broader range of industry than you normally work with? And why do you need to work with the government, and why does the government need to work with you? And I put this notional chart up here. On the vertical axis, I have a risk scale. If you want to invest, you've got to have you've got a relative amount of risk. Horizontally, there's a certain time scale where you're expecting a return on that investment. And then coming out of the chart, you expect some payoff. You're not going to invest in anything that doesn't have a significant payoff. And from my perspective, looking at industry, I see where industry would be looking at a portfolio of internal research and development investments, predominantly something that is above their minimum risk, acceptable risk. Majority of their funds is on the shorter time scale and has some significant payoff. We're willing to invest, and generally I would think of this as 1 to 3 years as an industry internal R&D time scale. And there would be some higher risk, longer term investments within industry. And I would consider that block of time and risk a single company's comfort zone. NASA, though, and I'm talking to the civil servants in the room, typically works on 5 to 10, maybe 20-year time scales in our investments. And we're not usually comfortable with working with a company who's going out there to sell its product next year and make a profit off of it. So we have to, in the same way, look at how can we stretch our government investments down in time and down in risk. So we have NASA up here, and in some cases the FAA research and the companies within their comfort zone. By building some of these collaborative R&D alliances, partnerships, teams, use whatever term you want. I'm using alliance with a small a, not a specific structure, not a specific type of alliance, but just in general partnerships. We can stretch the time scales for return on investments out to closer to 5 to 10 years, 3 to 5 years, and we can go for higher risk items when we're sharing that risk and sharing that cost. And this is what I would refer to as the alliance comfort zone. And that is both by aligning with the government sponsors, and multiple industry participants. All right, back to the NRA. What is an NRA? NRA is a NASA research announcement. It is a public request for research proposals. In general, the proposals are conceived by the offerers, and they are put out in broad technical areas which are in specific or difficult to define in sufficient detail. This is where the government wants to do something, but it's impossible for us to draft a specification or an RFP in sufficient detail for you to actually respond back and us to grade against a set amount of detail. This is a vehicle where we were looking for a multiplicity of possible approaches. And when I look at this room, I see a multitude of multiplicity. I think this is the appropriate solicitation when we have this many interested participants. Because if we went for a specific contract RFP, we would have already set the ground rules, we would have already set the specifications, and in most cases, probably the expectations of the researchers would probably already certainly limit the responses and limit the possibilities based on the paradigm of what the researcher is expecting. In NRA, it's much more open to new and creative approaches. What we cannot do with an NRA, we cannot solicit proposals for a specific system, and we cannot make a hardware procurement. That's not what we're looking for here. We're not buying a box. We're not buying a specific infrastructure. The government is not purchasing something here. We cannot use an NRA in place of a request for proposals when a requirement is narrowly defined. This is what you'll see if you have not read the draft statement of work that's out there. It's very broad. We're listing categories and ideas, but we're not telling you we want a data link with this specifications or a display with this detail operational requirements. An NRA can result in numerous awards. It can be multiple awards, and they can be negotiated as grants, contracts, cooperative agreements. We are, in this NRA, in the AWIN-RA, encouraging you to respond with a cooperative agreement. Respond with proposals geared toward cooperative agreements. We're looking for teaming and cost sharing, and that, by definition, is leading us to cooperative agreements. There are some cost-shared contracts, and there are other vehicles out there. This is not by far an inclusive list, but that's where we're pointing towards. NASA, based on the NRA regulations, NASA has the right to select or determine the appropriate instrument for that proposal, and then we'll go back and negotiate with you on that particular cooperative agreement or contract. A contract resulting from an NRA is subject to the Federal Acquisition Regulations, and any grant or cooperative agreement is subject to the NASA Grant Cooperative Agreement Handbook and the references therefore. If there are specific questions on cooperative agreements and the regulations of them, I can steer you to the right person. I am not an acquisition specialist. I am not a legal specialist, but I have enough information to lead you to the right person. And I'll be happy to answer general questions in that area. Let me go back to why we're steering you to cooperative agreements. And I've got a notional chart here that it's a lot of detail, but what I want to point out is there's a whole myriad of options in terms of contract vehicles. And what the boxes I've listed here are not all the solutions, and they're not specific categories. There's a spread, there's a long grayscale of different variations in contracts, cost-shared contracts, cooperative agreements, all the way up to grants. But what I want to steer here is a philosophy. In general, and I'm sure you can take any one of these categories and pick an example that says, hey, well, I got a grant and I did a manufacturing example, or I have a contract that I'm doing basic research. Any one of these vehicles can be used across the entire waterfront. But in general, it's most often used, grants are most often used in the basic research to applied research category, if you're going across the top there. You have basic research applied, prototyping, manufacturing, delivery. As you come down the scale toward contracts, that's generally more on the post-competitive side, and from cooperative research agreements back is generally looking for pre-competitive deliverables in terms of the type of contract vehicle. Vertically, generally, if the government wants to purchase something for the government use, it uses a contract. And we go vertically from there. If we wanted to co-fund something that we saw both government and industry use for, we could be using cost-shared contracts or cooperative research agreements. If we're going to co-fund something that has mostly industrial use, we could use something like a Space Act appropriation Joint sponsored research agreement. AGIT is an example of a joint sponsored research agreement. It's a very successful vehicle for what it's meant for. Pre-competitive deliverables, and industry is the final user of the deliverables. And up at the top, when government wants to fund something basically for public use, you could use a grant type mechanism. What I want to point out here is you think of working with the government, you think of contracts as a knee-jerk reaction. There's a whole myriad of them. Cooperative research agreements gives us, I think, the best tool for collaboration, where there is a significant amount of government participation in the work. As you go down the scale, contracts, government is leading is the leadership, providing the leadership role. In a grants, the government is not a player in the work. There's a whole myriad of in-between, and the cooperative research agreement, I think, is the right balance. From the vertical scale, government is not buying something, is not buying fatal accident rate reduction. We're investing in it. We want to see a return on that investment, but we also want to participate in that research. So I think cooperative research provides us that middle ground. Just a real quick comparison, if you talk about grants and cooperative agreements compared to contracts. Grants, the purpose of them are to carry out a public goal of support or stimulation. Substantial involvement is not expected by the government, and the government carries all the risk. It's the government funding that's really the key point there. Mike Durham's opinion of grants and generally that's like going to the racetrack and betting on the horses. You can study the race card, you can study the horses, but you're in the grandstand cheering, you're not participating. Cooperative agreements, in contrast, are vested partnerships. We're both investing in this research, we both have a vested interest in it, and we want to be successful in it. Cooperative agreements have government and industry as a co-leadership role. There is 50-50 cost sharing required in cooperative agreements. That gives us a shared risk. It is a fixed funding vehicle, which means as you get halfway down through the process and you say, oops, we didn't think about such and such, we need to renegotiate this. Fine, we can renegotiate this, we can renegotiate milestones, we can renegotiate content, but the funding level by the government is fixed. There is no cost growth in a cooperative agreement. The government participates substantially within not only the management, but within the research. Within cooperative agreements, alliances are encouraged. We're looking for teaming. Intellectual property rights are negotiable in general, and there's a whole section on intellectual properties within cooperative agreements, and they're by category of large commercial firms versus small businesses versus university nonprofits. But in general, I'll give an example of an industry, a large commercial business who can expect to get intellectual property, be it patents, inventions, discoveries. In general, the policy is that when you sign up for this agreement, you can, right up front, request a waiver for title to these inventions. The default is the government holds title, but in a cooperative agreement, we're encouraging large businesses to request a waiver to receive title, to own the intellectual property, to own the discoveries, and it's actually stated in the regulations, the government liberally grants these waivers. If you do not grant the upfront waiver within 30 days of the awards, you can, you can still negotiate intellectual property on a case-by-case basis per invention or discovery. And the government is encouraging that. The government wants this to be commercialized. It's not something the government wants to hold in terms of intellectual property rights. The government will always hold the royalty-free use of intellectual property from a cooperative agreement. If we co-fund something that is discovered, we're not going to pay you to use it. But that is not the intent. The intent is for commercialization by industry. Generally accepted accounting principles or commercial accounting standards are accepted. It is a, quote, streamlined procurement process that is relative to large contracts where you go through an RFP proposal, RFP solicitation, you go through a sequestered evaluation process, appeal process, and negotiation process. Cooperative agreements are not a free ride. We're doing this particular NRA on a very streamlined timeline. We're very ambitious in these schedules, but we're pushing to get this FY98 money coordinated. But it is, relative to general contracts, a much more streamlined procurement process. And I'll finish up here with desired AWIN proposal attributes. As we have said, each have said a number of times, we're working towards a very bold stretch goal of 10 times reduction in fatal accident rate. We're looking for proposals that have the proper technical breadth and focus and direction that are going to be able to contribute toward a large goal in this program. And in specific, in that means we want to be addressing weather problems, implementation hurdles, and involve system integration. We're not looking for, in general, with the exception of the topical areas, we're not looking for components that, hey, I've got the great widget, and if my widget were on the airplane, I would solve that accident 3 years ago. We're looking for systems that can make broad changes in the fatal accident rate. We're looking for technically aggressive proposals, not nibbling at the edges. We want to go out there and make bold changes in aviation weather information systems. We've got to be goal-oriented, data-driven, and metrics monitored, and we expect the proposals coming to us to be built in with those. We want to hear from you why your proposal, in terms of your research project, is going to make a difference in fatal accident rate. We expect you to go out and do some homework in that area. We're looking for partnerships representing a wide representation of aviation community. NASA historically has worked with the aircraft manufacturers and a lot of avionics manufacturers, but we're expecting teams in this particular program that go beyond that. Manufacturers, operators, regulators, users, the whole gamut. In order to actually get something implemented to actually make a difference in fatal accident rate, we've got to be pulling together a much wider community than we would normally work with. We want proposals that consider complete path from technology development to test to certification implementation. That does not mean that $400,000 is going to pay for all this. We're expecting this funded research to may only address one phase, but we want you to be looking at and planning your proposals across all of that path so that you're applying all the relevant issues to your phase. Quick example, I'm doing a technology development in a particular area. I don't expect to, as a result of my proposal, certify it, but I want you to consider the certification issues such that you do, in your research plans, you include the FAA, you include the relevant information so that when you gather your data, you're gathering certifiable data. You're actually using that information that's going to get you down the next path, whether it be in this particular phase, funded phase, or not. We're looking for proposals that identify a transition path. We're not only looking at systems and not components, we want to look at something that goes along a timeline. We're looking for retrofittable, interoperable, upgradable, that consider issues with NAS modernization. This is not going to be a one-shot, hey, I'm going to make my money in 2 years and get out. We want to know what proposals that are going to make a difference and survive this transition, that are upgradable and are going to make a difference as we evolve into a new modernized NAS. Finally, we're looking for efficiently managed teams through one agreement. We're telling you to go out and team and bring in multiple partners, but we expect to deal with, and that means joint partnerships and alliances wherever possible, but we're going to, in terms of a business partner, deal with one other business entity. That means that you have to have a prime relationship and have others working with you, or an alliance arrangement where we have a business vehicle specifically with that alliance, not with 10 of your partners. How I'm on time? I can answer a few questions, general questions, and if I can't answer them, I'll get somebody who can answer them for you. My intent here was just to kind of give you philosophy, not details. The NRA that is being worked as we speak will have plenty of detail on exactly how to respond to the NRA, and it'll have different instructions whether you're responding with a proposal towards a grant versus a cooperative agreement versus a contract. You're either asleep or you don't care. Yes.
Brian Haynes, Nav Radio. You mentioned that the NRA will have instructions relative to grants, contracts. What about JSRAs?
The JSRA is not specifically referenced in terms of an appropriate vehicle out of an NRA, so I can't say that I can automatically create a new Space Act JSRA as a result of this NRA, But specifically with agate, you're referring to, I think you're referring to the current agate consortium.
That's right.
I would be interested in proposals that would be funded through the current JSRA we have with agate. And obviously those are we've got some teams of people working in the GA community who are geared and ready, and I could see where we could fund, through that JSRA, we could fund some work with that consortium, yes.
Thank you.
Ron Diedrichs, Honeywell. These slides from all of the presentations, will they be available?
Yes, they will. I do not know
Thanks.
what time frame the proceedings are going to come out. We'll get the hard copies for anybody who signs in as a registrant. We'll just read a hard copy of the proceedings, yes. I think for this first morning's presentations, what I'll do is I'll try to package them and put them up on that same web address under this heading of the Aviation Weather Workshop so you can pull them down electronically. Yes, we'll do that. It'll probably take us about 48 hours to get that up there, but we'll do that. Yes?
This is Tom Young from JPL. Can these alliances involve foreign government sponsors?
My understanding of the solicitation is that it cannot exclude. We are open in that. But we are also interested in the whole basis of our investments are to promote U.S. industry, U.S. manufacturing, U.S. jobs. But I could see where there would be a partner, a foreign partner to a U.S. team, yes. That's my opinion. I think the NRA will give you much more detail on that. But I think that's where we're heading. We're heading for U.S.-led teams, but could have foreign participation. Anybody can help me on that one? Is Rich Siebels here? Yes, Rich. Is that a correct statement? Rich Siebels is from our acquisition division. He's helping me put this NRA together?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. We cannot exclude T partners, and the NRA will be very clear with that.
Thank you, Rich. Yes.
This is John Noonan from Bowling. One question on task order assignments that some companies already have. Could we use those as a continuation for the work we're doing here? We are already in a number of other elements where we have investments in safety that we already had existing contracts with some of the key players. We're already, where they are within the scope and within the contract for task order contracts, we're already doing some funding in that area. What we're looking for here is new efforts. If you can show in your proposal that the current vehicle you have completely encompasses the work you want to do, I would say it's possible. It does not have to be actually a new agreement through this AWIN, but it would be a choice where we're saying, all right, we got a good proposal for research. We already have the business vehicle. We don't have to award a new vehicle. We can go through that modification process. But I am skeptical. I'm looking for large new teams that could be funded through an existing primes task order, but I'm skeptical. Okay, I hope I didn't confuse you. This was a layman's view of a path we're heading down. And I'll answering questions in the hallway or follow up in a breakout room if I can help anybody. Thanks.
Thank you a lot, Mike. It's time for our break. We'll be back here at 11 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
So you are all here. I'm really gratified with the turnout. We hopefully aren't going to run out of seats here, Mike. And we'll have plenty of information, plenty of dialogue, and plenty of exchange that will set the stage for actually accomplishing goal number one in this, which is the safety goal, to dramatically reduce the accident rate for the aviation industry. So let me say welcome to Langley. Welcome to a workshop that I think will be an important one for getting us on the road to where we need to be. I trust that you're going to have a productive workshop here. I know that you will. And please let me know if there's anything that we can do to make the workshop more productive and to make your stay here more enjoyable. With that, I'll turn the meeting over, I guess, to Mike. And let me just end by saying really important work we have to do. Those of us who travel are very concerned about weather information today and for the future. So we're counting on you. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Lee. Good morning, folks. I'm Mike Lewis, and I'm the director for the NASA's Aviation Safety Program, and this is going to be good. Lots of folks here, and this is the
public can really relate to. And I am really feeling good about what has happened over the last year in trying to focus us in NASA and our partner agencies and organizations in industry toward achieving some very ambitious goals. These goals are extremely ambitious. They're stretch goals, they're very challenging. But in my view, they are very, very important. They're important in establishing a framework such that the aviation industry can continue to grow the way we are all projecting that it will grow. But in order for that to happen, in my view, we have to produce an environment for safety, for the environment, and for capacity that removes those as constraints for growth. And so one of the things that this document does is challenge us to essentially eliminate barriers to growth for the aviation industry. I think we can do that, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of teamwork, and a lot of commitment by lots of people, including you here in this Aviation Weather Information workshop. So we have a tough job to do, and I'm glad that
kind of the kickoff workshop, basically, for the whole strategy and approach that we have for planning out the program and making sure that we keep kind of government and industry working together here to make it all work. So let me, kind of advantage of being the director of the program, I got to yak a little bit at the beginning here. So I want to kind of just give a quick overview of how we got here. Won't take but 3 minutes, and then talk a little bit about the aviation weather information from my perspective anyway. Lee talked about the 3 pillars document and the national goals, of which the aviation safety goal, cut the accident rate by 80% over the next 10 years, is not only the first goal, but I think it is, and or if not, it will become the most visible goal that NASA has for a whole bunch of reasons. However, that's the NASA goal is not to, we can't do it by ourselves to achieve that reduction in the accident rate. We are responsible for, as are other folks, but not solely responsible for the enabling technology and doing some of that fundamental R&D and get the ball rolling on the R&D side to provide that information and that technology to achieve the goal. There's kind of 3 steps in the process. There's the R&D step, there's the certification step, which clearly is the FAA major role, and there's the last step, which is development and production and implementation, which is the industry, the airframers, the avionics manufacturers, and the airlines and operators. All 3 of those need to work together. All 3 of them cross over into each other's territory to make the whole thing.
Information workshop. I would like to introduce Dr. Lee Beach. He's Deputy Director of the NASA Research Langley Center. He's served in this position since January of '92. He's the General Manager of the Center and responsible for directing research and technology programs and for institutional management of all facilities and equipment. Dr. Beach began his NASA career here at Langley in October of 1970 as a research engineer. Okay, done.
On behalf of NASA's Aeronautics and Space Transportation Technology Enterprise, and certainly on behalf of the Langley Research Center, I'd like to welcome all of you to what I think is going to be a very important workshop. As I'm sure all of you are aware, over the last year, the NASA Aeronautics and Space Transportation Technology Enterprise put a lot of effort, along with people from organizations that you represent, in producing this document, 3 Pillars for Success, which includes 10 goals for aeronautics and space transportation technology. I've been in this agency almost 30 years now, and as far as I'm concerned, this document is one of the very best that has been produced over that time period in focusing efforts in this arena in areas that the general public
and we can't do it without all three. So that's why we're trying to get large groups like this together to help guide the program and put it together. So NASA's got one piece of making this goal happen. FAA has a very large piece throughout. Industry has a very large piece. Other government agencies have their pieces, and hopefully we'll make it work. ASSIST. Many of you are ASSIST veterans. Aviation Safety Investment Strategy Team process, which really, for NASA anyway, kicked this whole activity off. White House Commission on Aviation Safety and Security met through February or so of this year, over a few-month period. And their report out in February coincided with the kickoff of NASA's adoption of the White House Commission goal of let's cut the accident rates, and NASA adopted it into our three-pillar strategy and kicked off the beginning of what has become the aviation safety program. And we went through this workshop process where we invited pretty large groups again, both government and industry and operators and universities and so on, to come together for workshops to try and identify the investment strategy. We were given a nice aggressive goal, given a fairly sizable intended budget, and it was a clean sheet of paper basically as to what we do as a government and as a nation as to how to go about doing that. And so we started this ASSIST workshop process, broke down into 5 teams. Most of you are aware of that, or all I guess are, of which clearly one was the weather team. And